Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up's James Bond Retrospective, and we come to our review of what many of the die-hard fans consider the pinnacle of the series, where producers Broccoli and Saltzman understood what worked with the formula from the first two movies, including factoring in what audiences wanted to see, and implemented these elements into Goldfinger. The film, widely regarded as the go-to Bond film if you're introducing the series to a Bond virgin, is a heady cocktail of girls, gadgets, Connery's Bond at inarguably his coolest, a killer theme song performed by the inimitable Shirley Bassey, and one of the series' standout villains in Auric Goldfinger to boot. The film opens, as had the previous From Russia with Love, with an excellent, if ludicrous, mini-adventure, which in this outing sees Bond sneaking up to a factory in a wetsuit before peeling it back to reveal a perfectly pressed white dinner jacket complete with red carnation before planting explosives in a factory. From this opening sequence alone, Connery excels in expressing the cool of Fleming's protagonist. From here we launch into another of Robert Brownjohn's title designs. Following the simplistic and effective titles for From Russia, Goldfinger sees moments from the film itself projected onto the bodies of golden girls. Coupled with Bassey's powerhouse vocals on perhaps the greatest Bond theme song of the lot, it's a promising opening 10 minutes to this third Bond adventure. Based on Fleming's 007th Bond novel, following Dr. No in novel order, published in 1959 in England and America, Fleming got the idea for Goldfinger during an April 1956 stay at Enton Hall, a health spa in central England. He met a gold broker whilst there who educated him on the trade of the world's most coveted metal. This gold broker became the inspiration for Fleming's antagonist. The movie Goldfinger itself is a largely faithful adaptation of the novel. Bond is given his mission by M to look into Auric Goldfinger, and in so doing uncovers Goldfinger's plot to irradiate the gold supply of Fort Knox in order to increase the value of his own stock for years to come. Along the way, he also makes acquaintance with Honor Blackman's alluring Pussy Galore. In an early draft of the script, Pussy was known as Kitty to appease censors and prudish critics, which was thankfully changed, and he also brushes up against Goldfinger's Korean manservant Oddjob, played with clear relish by wrestler Harold Sakata. Riding high on the box office success of From Russia with Love, filming began on Goldfinger on January the 20th, 1964, with the first scenes shot at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami. The hotel and poolside set was recreated at Pinewood Studios for close-ups of the principal actors in April 1964, when Ian Fleming would visit the set for the last time before his passing in August. The film had a release date scheduled for September the same year, so they had to work fast. Broccoli and Saltzman set a budget of $3 million for Goldfinger. Previous director Terence Young failed to negotiate with the producers on a financial agreement, so well-established director Guy Hamilton was brought onto the project in November 1963, a month after From Russia with Love got its UK release. Hamilton was concerned that Bond was becoming a bit of a Superman, but utilising the elements that worked best on the two previous Bonds, they set to work on Goldfinger with a clear direction. This third film, perhaps more than any other entry in the series, gives fans one glorious set piece after another. The first shocking moment in the film comes following Bond's defeat over Goldfinger at cards, when he borrows Jill Masterson, but their time together is short-lived, as Jill would be painted entirely in gold. It's a striking visual that would make actress Shirley Eaton famous for gracing the front covers of many a magazine in 1964 to promote the exoticism of the new Bond film. The scene itself is shot at Pinewood Studios on April the 20th, 1964. Actress Shirley Eaton has later recalled the scene in interviews, stating how efficient director Guy Hamilton was in getting the scene filmed in one morning. From here we get the return of Desmond Llewellyn as Gadget Master Q. Filmed on a single day, Friday the 22nd of May 1964, Llewellyn recalled that he began the scene by standing to greet Bond as Bond walked into his lab, but Guy Hamilton directed Llewellyn against this, explaining that Q has nothing but contempt for Bond's cavalier attitude towards his work and for the way he mistreats Q's gadgets. The frostiness that Llewellyn plays the scene with is perfect against Connery's sarcastic and clearly bored 007. Thankfully, the two characters would develop a fonder working relationship as the series progressed. The scene would also, of course, introduce 60s audiences to the gorgeous Aston Martin DB5, dubbed the most famous car in the world. It's almost a character of its own in the narrative, and has become a signature part of Bond himself in the film series, having appeared in multiple entries in the canon, as well as returning for the forthcoming Bond 25. 1,023 Aston DB5s went into circulation in the 1960s, and 2 models were used for the filming of Goldfinger. Both of these Astons used on the film were sold for $250,000 each and are now owned by private collectors. The first time that Bond and Goldfinger meet face to face is in a brilliantly devised golf game, filmed at the world-famous Stoke Poges golf course next to Pinewood Studios. Connery's real-life love affair with the game began while filming in May 1964. It's an unassuming little sequence in the grand scheme of the narrative, but demonstrates Bond and Goldfinger's contempt for one another and what they both stand for, whilst Bond plays Goldfinger for a fool. Another standout sequence in the film, from which the eternal line, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die," comes, sees Bond strapped to a laser table. This was the first scene filmed between Goldfinger actor Gert Frober and Sean Connery on the film across 3 days at Pinewood Studios in March 1964. There's just the right amount of suspense, whilst also maintaining the tongue-in-cheek nature of the idea of Bond being robbed of his manhood. The principal cast of the film were all in place in the new year 1964, with Honor Blackman announced in the press in early January as the new Bond girl. Blackman was the only actress considered for the part, following her extensive work on the television series The Avengers. As Cubby Broccoli himself has commented, all her crinkly leather action and shoulder throws she did on The Avengers virtually clinched it for her to tussle with James Bond. Tanya Mallet was also cast early on to play the short-lived Tilly Masterson, whose fate is also in the hands of Goldfinger's servant Oddjob. Whilst Blackman commits herself well to the role, Mallet is one of the film's few weak links. Blackman and Connery have strong chemistry together on screen, and Pussy is a more fleshed-out character on screen than she was in Fleming's original novel. For henchman Oddjob, Guy Hamilton turned to Hawaiian wrestler and athlete Harold Sakata. Sakata was screen-tested against later Bond actor Charles Gray, playing Goldfinger, on November the 28th, 1963, and he got the role. Charles Gray was clearly on the Bond radar, as he would appear in 2 later Connery films, You Only Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever. Both Connery and Hamilton have remarked that Sakata was a genuine, gentle guy, and his contribution to the villainy in Goldfinger, and moreover the mark he's made on the iconography of the series, cannot be underestimated. So committed was Sakata to the role that he actually landed a blow to Connery's shoulder in his Miami hotel room and held onto the bars in Fort Knox while the explosions were going off on set, consequently getting himself badly burnt, because director Hamilton didn't say cut. The most impressive newcomer to the Bond series in this film is, of course, German-born Gert Frober's performance as villain Auric Goldfinger. He represents the highly intelligent, greedy, larger-than-life archetype of what has now become the classic Bond villain, and is one of the finest adversaries 007 has ever faced. Frober was cast following his turn as a child molester in the 1958 German film Es geschah am helllichten Tag, the English translation It Happened in Broad Daylight, but it's the voice of British actor and voiceover artist Michael Collins heard whenever Frober opens his mouth in the film, as it was clear that Frober couldn't speak any English. Not that you'd know, of course, as the dubbing is seamless. Connery recalls Frober being a sweet man to work alongside, and the chemistry on screen between the 2 actors is fascinating to watch. John Barry returned to scoring duties for Goldfinger, and the soundtrack as a whole has a much loungier tone than before, with a fine motif on the main title song used throughout to emphasise the sneaky Bond we know and love. Barry scored the film in record time during the film's very short post-production schedule, and would be scoring scenes from the film direct from the cutting room floor. In a wonderfully ironic fashion, given Bond's at the time contemporary comments about the music of the Beatles in the film, the sales of the Goldfinger soundtrack eclipsed the sales of the Beatles in 1964, further cementing the global phenomenon that the cinematic Bond quickly became. Goldfinger is a tour de force of excitement, intrigue, exoticism, danger and cheek, and the film's climax, the raid on Fort Knox, is one of the most elaborate in the series. The design for Fort Knox was clearly going to be a challenge, as not even the Bond crew were allowed access into the Fort Knox, so it was down to production designer Ken Adam to design down to Cubby Broccoli's specifications, a cathedral of gold. As very few people know what the interior of the actual Fort Knox looks like, Adam had carte blanche to let his imagination run wild. Filming for the climax of the film took place in mid-June 1964, continuing for almost 2 weeks. The physical shoot also took its toll on Connery, who was sent home from set early on one occasion following a fight sequence because of a swollen eye. It's all in a day's work on a James Bond motion picture. Some more trivia for fact fans. Producer Harry Saltzman decided near the end of the shoot that the bomb in Fort Knox should be stopped with 007 seconds to spare as opposed to 3. The image was changed for the finished film, but the dialogue of 3 more ticks left was unaltered. Margaret Nolan, who played Bond's masseuse Dink in the Miami sequence, also portrayed the Golden Girl in the film's title sequence and was the principal model used for the Goldfinger poster artwork. And finally, this is the first cameo in the series for long-running producer Michael G. Wilson. Getting an early break in the industry at the impressionable age of 22, Wilson doubled a Korean on the Fort Knox set and also doubled for Bond when he sat opposite Oddjob in the back of the truck, taking them to Fort Knox. Connery's final day on the film was July the 21st, 1964, with the filming of Tilly Masterson's death, but further shots were completed up to August 12th, 1964, which coincidentally was the same day that news broke of the death of Bond's creator Ian Fleming. Fleming would only live to see the cinematic success of the first 2 adventures, Dr. No and From Russia with Love, but as the film series moves ever closer to its 60th anniversary of thrilling audiences, wherever Fleming is, I imagine he's smiling. Despite a few dodgy back projection shots early in the film and some slightly sagging pacing issues in the second act, Goldfinger is dynamite. It's easy to see why the fandom rate this as highly as they do. It's entertaining, it doesn't outstay its welcome, it boasts one of the series' finest villains, and Connery also gives another great, comfortable performance in the role. It's a shame, therefore, that Bond himself as a character is fairly useless in this film, allowing multiple women to die, allowing himself to be captured and almost lose his masculinity, and learning of the villain's plot at the last moment. That said, if you're looking for pure escapist entertainment, you can do a lot worse than this confident, suave third instalment in the canon. Released in the UK on September 17th, 1964, with box office takings of over £2.3 million, the film would go on to gross almost $125 million worldwide, breaking box office records almost everywhere it opened. The film celebrates its 55th anniversary this year, so our suggestion? Give this gem another watch. Despite a couple of small niggles that we've discussed, Goldfinger is a classic and deserves... Where does Bond's third adventure sit for you in the adventures so far? Let us know your thoughts on the film in the comments below, and please let us know if you enjoyed this review. If you did enjoy it and would like to know exactly when we post new content, you'll want to subscribe to Crawford-Clark Close-Up at the top of the page so you don't miss out. Come and find us on Facebook and Twitter, and drop us an email with suggestions for future reviews on the channel to crawfordclarkkcloseup@gmail.com. Stay tuned, as we'll be bringing you soon our 100th video on the channel, and to celebrate we're bringing you a special video highlighting some of our personal favourite films of all time. James Bond will return in our review of the next Sean Connery outing, Thunderball. Thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.